All right, so a couple weeks ago, towards the beginning of August, Cori Bush was sleeping outside on the steps of the Capitol building, basically protesting the eviction moratorium expiring or being allowed to expire by the Joe Biden administration. And thankfully, because of her protesting efforts, Joe Biden acted unilaterally and extended the eviction moratorium. Now, there was this big debate about whether or not this was legal or even constitutional. And so basically, him extending this eviction moratorium was mostly an effort to slow the process of evictions, give us a little bit more time to dole out a lot of the billions and billions of dollars that were supposed to be allocated to renters and landlords as part of the initial COVID relief packages. Basically, none of the relief that was supposed to be going out to a lot of these tenants has actually gotten to them. And so this entire protest effort by Cori Bush could maybe end up being in vain because it seems like, according to the New York Times at least, that we are not even anywhere close to getting this rental assistance out. So again, the entire point of extending the eviction moratorium in the way that Joe Biden did was not to necessarily have it succeed and not be struck down by the Supreme Court, but it was really just to buy us time to dole out a lot of these figures. But about 89% of rental assistance funds have not been distributed, figures show. Just $1.7 billion in funds intended to prevent evictions were dispersed in July as the White House braces for a Supreme Court decision that could strike down its eviction moratorium. So let's go ahead and read some of the details here. So they say the $46.5 billion rental aid program created to pay rent accrued during the pandemic continues to disperse money at a slow pace as the White House braces for a Supreme Court order that could strike down the new national moratorium on evictions. And the Emergency Rental Assistance Program, funded in the two federal pandemic relief packages passed over the last year, sputtered along in July with just $1.7 billion being distributed by state and local governments, according to the Treasury Department, which oversees the program. $1.7 billion out of $46.5 billion that was supposed to be going to these people months ago. Okay, so ridiculously behind in the ways that they have been distributing this. So they continue saying, the money meted out was a modest increase from the prior month, bringing the total aid dispersed thus far to about $5.1 billion. Figures released early Wednesday showed, or roughly 11% of the cash allocated by Congress to avoid an eviction crisis that many housing experts now see as increasingly likely. So why is this happening? Well, on Wednesday, the Treasury Department rolled out a slate of incremental changes intended to pressure states to move more quickly, but the administration officials continued to blame the program's struggles on local officials, many of whom are reluctant to take advantage of the program's new fast-track application process, which would allow tenants to self-certify their financial information, okay? In recent weeks, local officials have complained that moving too fast on aid applications could lead to errors, frauds, and audits. The White House has countered by telling them that those risks are insignificant compared with the wave of evictions hitting tenants who did not get their aid quickly enough to keep a roof over their heads. So understand how ridiculous this is, okay? I think the White House is actually correct in their analysis here of what's slowing down this process. It is a lot of these state and local governments that really don't really want the aid to go out because they don't care about these people that are at risk of being thrown out onto the streets. They care more about the landlords having the ability to throw them out on the streets and replace them with other people. So this is the situation that we have right now. They're literally coming out and saying, we're more worried about potential errors or fraud that could be committed by these people, which there's no evidence that that has been widespread at all. But they're saying we would rather reduce the risk or eliminate the risk of having even the potential of fraud. We would rather have a situation in which millions of people are potentially going to be thrown out onto the streets. So it's a completely ridiculous choice that they're making here. But a lot of these state and local governments are simply rejecting the rapid processes that they have given them the opportunity to use to speed this up, essentially. And so it's not happening at a fast enough clip. And they also say, another reason, but many owners, especially small landlords, have rejected the federal aid, arguing that evicting non-paying tenants is not only their right, but the most effective way of ensuring their revenue is not interrupted in the future. So again, you have state, local governments that represent more the landlords than they would the actual tenants who are suffering right now. And you have actual landlords themselves who are saying, no, we don't really want the aid. We don't care that, it would actually benefit us in the short term. We would rather evict these people that have had problems paying their rent throughout the course of the pandemic and replace them with new people. They're openly saying they don't give a shit, okay? And so that's the situation that we have right now as we are seeing a spike in COVID that is really not like anything we've seen since that last winter surge that we saw last year. And I mean, look, this is when the last ruling happened, right? It was roughly in June where the Supreme Court basically, they came out and they said, We're not going to let you extend this by executive order. We're not going to let you extend the eviction moratorium by executive order. This has to be done through Congress. And so Congress failed to do that. But understand, this is when that was happening. This is when the Supreme Court was making that decision. So we had roughly like 14,000 to 13,000 maybe 7-day average per day cases of COVID. And now look at where we are. I mean, we are up all the way to, on a 7-day average, 151,000 cases per day. So we're in a completely different realm than the last time the Supreme Court looked at this decision. And that was a 5-4 decision where Brett Kavanaugh actually flipped sides and stood on the side of the liberals in the Supreme Court. And the question is now, are they going to do that again? Well, probably not, because they came out and said last time, we're not going to side with keeping this eviction moratorium after the July 31st deadline. So we're in a weird scenario right now where basically a lot of people, millions of people, have fallen behind on rent because of the pandemic and the economic consequences that followed it. So through no fault of their own, they're falling behind on rent. Congress allocates $50 billion, which is like roughly the amount of money that they say is estimated to be needed to fix this problem right now. And yet none of that money has been distributed, likely or largely because a lot of these state and local governments and landlords themselves don't want it to be working. So it's not even a problem of us not having the funding allocated. It's a problem of us just simply not being able to get the money in the hands of people. And you saw what they were pointing out in that article. The main stalemate that has been holding this up is just means testing. They're making the process harder for tenants to be able to get this relief directly. And even with this process that the White House put out, the fast track process where tenants can self-report their own financial struggles that they're going through in order to get the relief, it's still not enough. So it's a completely ridiculous situation where after those efforts by Cori Bush, where she slept out for multiple days outside of Capitol Hill to finally get this extended to buy us some more time to get this relief money going out, they're not using it. So it's still not even close to enough. And we're in a situation now where, in a month or two, we could see the Supreme Court strike down this eviction moratorium and then be right back where we were a couple months ago with potentially millions of people at risk of being thrown out onto the streets. So this is not acceptable. And honestly, this is more evidence than anything, in my opinion, that these means-tested ways of getting people relief don't work. You know what did work last year or at the beginning of this year is giving people checks. So this is a type of situation where if I was Joe Biden or if I was Congress, and I had control of both the House, the Senate, and the presidency, maybe I would be sending out another check. You have thousands and thousands of people that are thousands of dollars behind on rent. Why not send everybody another $2,500, a $3,000 check so they can at least make back a couple months? And that's something that could happen very, very quickly, counter to what these heavily means-tested programs have been able to do. So we have to fix this problem right now. If you let this happen, then again, in a month or two, we're going to be back with the Supreme Court negating this eviction moratorium, and millions of people are still going to be at risk of being thrown out onto the streets during a pandemic.